"Ma'am, you okay?" She looked like she'd crawled out of a building that had burned down around her. A sleeveless brown vest hung from her shoulders in tatters, the edges blackened and frayed. Under it, a once gray shirt clung in shredded layers, full of holes big enough to fit 3 fingers through. The fabric was stiff with soot and something darker. Her head was wrapped in a dark cloth, knotted low at the back, stray wisps of silver hair poking out like wire. Her skin was leathered, deep-lined, every crease caught with dust and ash. Black streaks smeared her cheekbones and neck as if she'd wiped at smoke with the back of her hand and only moved the dirt around. Her hands, bony, cracked, trembling, were cupped in front of her with almost ceremonial care, as if she was already asking for something she wasn't sure she deserved. She didn't look up when his shadow fell over her. She just panted, lips split and chalk dry. Behind her, on the far stretch of road, a black sedan sat idling on the opposite shoulder. Tinted windows, nose angled toward them but not moving. Too clean for this lonely strip. Vance's instinct twisted, but the sight of the woman's fingers twitching in the dust overruled it. He crouched, the fabric of his shirt pulling tight across his back, and fumbled inside the car for the one cold thing he had left. A half-full plastic bottle that had sweated itself into a ring in the cup holder. "Here," he said, easing the cap off. "Easy now." Her eyes lifted at last. They weren't cloudy with age like he expected. They were sharp, dark, alive. The kind of eyes that had watched things burn and walked away on purpose. Suspicion flared there first, quick and measuring, scanning his face, his clothes, the car, the road, the watching sedan. Then she focused on the water. Her hands came up, still cupped, still reverent. He steadied the bottle above them and tipped it slowly. The first spill hit her palms and she flinched as if it burned, then dragged her hands to her mouth and drank in short, hard pulls. Not gulps, she was too weak for that, but controlled swallows like someone who knew exactly how much the body could take before it revolted. He let her drink until the bottle was almost empty. Her throat worked. A line of water ran down, carved a clean trail through the soot at her jaw, disappeared into the rags. "More?" he asked. She didn't answer, just stared at him. Up close, Vance could see the way her gaze never settled on one thing. It flicked past his shoulder, to the horizon, the scrub, the parked sedan. Calculating, cataloging. He felt absurdly like a piece of property she was appraising. "I can call an ambulance," he offered. "Or the sheriff. You shouldn't be out here like this." Her right hand dropped. Her left hand, the one closer to him, slid along his wrist with a sudden, surprising strength. Cold metal pressed into his palm. Small, hard, deliberate. He looked down. A round locket lay in his hand, no bigger than a quarter but heavier than it had any right to be. Its surface was scratched and smoke-stained, but beneath the grime he saw the ghost of an emblem, wings spread wide over a shield. Not jewelry store work. Military, maybe. Old. Before he could ask, she leaned closer. The smell of smoke and sweat and days without shelter rolled off her, but her voice, when it came, was steady. "Don't go home yet," she whispered. The words were sandpaper, rough, low, cutting straight through his attempt at distance. "What?" he said, thrown. "Look, Her fingers tightened once around his, forcing his fist closed around the locket. Then her gaze slid over his shoulder again to the black sedan. Vance followed it. The car's engine revved softly. It pulled away from the shoulder, not toward them but past, slow enough that he caught his own reflection warping in the dark glass. No plates he could read. No faces. When he turned back, the woman was trying to stand. He grabbed her elbow on instinct. Under the layers of burned cloth was rope-hard muscle that didn't match the way she shook. She swayed, then steadied, eyes squeezing shut against the sun. "You need a hospital," he said. "Or a shelter." I can drive you into town. No, her voice cracked on the single syllable. Ma'am, I can't just leave you. Don't, she said, forcing her eyes open. They drilled into him, suddenly fierce. Go. Home. Yet. The last word landed heavy, like something she'd carried too far already. He hesitated, dry heat pressing at the back of his neck, the locket cooling his palm. Somewhere in the distance, a crow screamed once and fell silent. Maybe she was confused. Maybe she was running from someone in that sedan. Maybe this was what sunstroke did to people. Maybe, he thought, you're overthinking this because you can't fix the one thing you actually care about. The tuition notice pinned to the fridge. All right, he said, backing off. There's a shade tree a mile up. I'll tell the county guys you're out here. They drive this road more than anybody. She didn't argue, didn't thank him, just watched him again with that evaluating stare, like she was engraving his face into some hidden ledger. When he slid back behind the wheel, he realized he was still clutching the locket. He set it in the cup holder next to the abandoned cap and pulled away. In his rearview mirror, the woman shrank down to a smudge against the dust. The black sedan was gone. By the time the highway widened toward the suburbs, his rational mind had already filed the whole thing under strange but over. People broke down on Texas roads all the time. Desertion, bad luck, worse choices. It all ended the same way. Somebody hot and thirsty on pavement. His life, on the other hand, was built on avoiding surprises. He lived in a quiet cul-de-sac on the outskirts of Austin, just far enough from downtown that the skyline was a rumor on the horizon. The houses all matched in shape and color. A row of beige boxes with manicured lawns and aging SUVs in the driveways. He'd picked this place after his wife left, when Lucy was 6 and afraid of every loud sound. Good school district, low crime, HOA that cared more about weeds than people. Predictable. Contained. He wasn't hiding from the law or enemies or debt collectors. He was hiding from chaos. That afternoon, as he turned into his subdivision, it looked exactly the way he liked it. Normal. Sprinklers hacksawed across perfect grass. Somebody's kid's bike lay abandoned on a sidewalk. A woman in yoga pants jogged past with earbuds in, not even glancing at his dusty sedan. His chest loosened. Of course, the old woman had been rambling. Of course. He parked in front of the small white house with the peeling trim he kept promising to paint when commissions picked up. The front steps were cracked. The porch light leaned at a tired angle. In the big front window, pastel construction paper framed Lucy's latest school project. Some kind of solar system with a too-bright sun dominating everything. "Dad!" she yelled as soon as the front door clicked. 11 years old, bare feet slapping down the hallway, curls barely tamed by a cheap elastic. She slammed into him with enough force to rock him back a step. "Hey, Luce!" He wrapped an arm around her, the other still oddly aware of the weight in his pocket where he'd shoved the locket at a red light. "You finish your math?" "Almost." She glanced past him, hopeful. "You bring food." "Leftovers," he said. "Future food. Better than math." She groaned dramatically, but she was already peeling off toward the kitchen, a trail of school papers fluttering from under her arm. Vance set his keys in the ceramic bowl by the door. The locket clinked against them when he dropped it in. For a moment he just stared down at it, the dull metal catching a thin line of light. That emblem, the wings, the faint ring of numbers etched around the edge, tiny and cramped. Not something you found in a thrift store bin. Probably military, he thought again. Dog tag's fancy cousin. Maybe someone's grandmother's keepsake. Maybe it meant enough to her that she was trying to pass it on before she died on some county road. He told himself he'd swing by the sheriff's office tomorrow, describe her, see if anyone was looking. By 10 that night, he was too tired to think about it. Lucy was asleep, sprawled half off her bed, hugging a stuffed dolphin with one flipper missing. He fixed the dolphin, turned off her lamp, checked the deadbolt twice. In his own room, the ceiling fan rattled on every third rotation. The alarm clock glowed 10:47 p.m. in sullen red. The house smelled faintly of reheated pasta and lemon cleaner. Still, as he lay on his back, the words slipped in under the fan noise. "Don't go home yet." The phrase sat there like a weight on his chest. He shifted, punched his pillow, told himself it was nothing. People on the edge of collapse said all kinds of things. Outside, a dog barked. Then another. Somewhere down the street, an engine idled too long and then cut off. He got up once, went to the front window, and nudged the curtain just enough to see the cul-de-sac. Streetlights hummed, turning everything the color of old bones. The only cars were the usual ones, lined up and sleeping. No black sedan. He exhaled, shut the curtain, and told himself he'd feel stupid in the morning for losing sleep over a stranger and a chunk of metal in a bowl. He was still telling himself that when the morning came, right up until the voice on the loudspeaker shattered the glass calm. "Vance Sterling," a man barked. The words flattened and amplified until they seemed to come from the walls themselves. "Step out of the house with your hands visible." Vance jerked awake, heart sprinting. For a disorienting second, he thought he'd dreamed it. Then it came again, louder. "Vance Sterling, this is your only warning." He swung his legs out of bed. The floorboards were cold under his feet. Down the hall, Lucy's door flew open. "Dad?" she called, scared already. "What's happening?" "Stay in your room," he said, grabbing his shirt from the chair and shoving his arms through. "Don't come out, okay? Just stay there." Her face appeared in her doorway, wide-eyed. "Is it a fire? Is it?" "Lucy." He forced calm into his voice. "Please." She froze, nodded once, and vanished back inside. He crossed the living room in 3 strides, every step pulling him closer to the front window and the source of that amplified authority. His fingers shook as he peeled the curtain back a sliver and looked out. At first, it didn't make sense. The sun was barely up, a harsh, low disk turning the cul-de-sac into a flood of light and shadow. Across the front of his house, from property line to property line, a wall of dark uniforms stood in absolute formation. They were not local cops. Dark navy jackets razor-pressed, gold buttons catching the sun. White belts so clean they almost glowed. Trousers with blood-red stripes knifing down the sides. Peaked caps, each brim held at the same angle. Their black boots were spaced with such precision that the line looked printed on the street. Vance's brain started counting for 8, 12, then gave up. There had to be at least 30 of them. Maybe more, stretching beyond the arc of his front yard, closing off the street in both directions. Behind them, 2 black SUVs and a matte green truck blocked the road like someone had taken a high-security perimeter and dropped it into the middle of his sleepy subdivision. None of the men moved. None shifted their weight, scratched an itch, adjusted a belt. Their faces were perfectly blank, eyes hidden under cap brims, hands folded in front or clasped behind backs with parade ground stillness. They didn't look like protectors. They looked like a verdict. "Mr. Sterling," the voice boomed again, this time clearly from the man standing front and center. He held a megaphone in one hand, the other resting lightly on the small of his back. Older than the rest, lines carved deep around his mouth, a row of colorful ribbons on his chest. His posture radiated the kind of hard, unquestioned command that made everyone around him into scenery. "We know you're inside. Do not make us come in for you." Vance let the curtain fall back into place. His mouth had gone painfully dry. He could feel his pulse in his throat, in his temples, in the tips of his fingers. 30 military officers on his lawn. For him, his first stupid thought was that they'd made a mistake. Wrong house. Wrong man. He sold homes. He juggled open houses and unpaid invoices and his kids' science projects. He didn't have anything anyone in a dress uniform could possibly want. Except, his gaze slid to the ceramic bowl by the door. Keys, crumpled receipts, and that smoke-scored circle of metal, sitting on top like it had been waiting for roll call. Last chance, Mr. Sterling. The commander called, voice tightening. Step out with the asset or we will secure it ourselves. You do not want us inside your home. Asset. The word landed cold. Vance picked up the locket, its weight suddenly disproportionate. What did you get me into? He muttered, picturing the woman on the road. Dust. Those appraising eyes. He cracked the door an inch, enough to shout without showing himself. I think you've got the wrong guy, he called, hoping his voice didn't shake as much as it felt. This is private property. I want to see a warrant. A ripple went through the line, barely there, but real. The commander lifted the megaphone again. This operation is classified under the authority of the State Security Task Force, he said. You are harboring restricted federal property. Open the door and surrender the asset immediately. You have 30 seconds to comply. State Security Task Force. Vance had never heard of it. It sounded made up and official at the same time. He shut the door, heart hammering. Back in the hallway, Lucy had edged out again, clutching her stuffed dolphin like a life raft. Dad? She whispered. There's soldiers outside. I know. He forced a smile that felt brittle. We're gonna play a game, okay? Quiet game. Follow everything Dad says game. Her eyes flicked to the door, then to the locket in his hand. Are we in trouble? I don't know yet, he said honestly. But we're not going to find out standing here. The words from the road hit him full force now. Don't go home yet. He'd done exactly that. Brought whatever this was straight to the one place that mattered. He took Lucy's arm gently. Shoes on. Now, quiet. Where are we going? Back door. They're in the front, she said. Won't they see us? They don't have to see us, he said. Not if we go under. Her brow furrowed, confusion fighting with fear. Under what? Just trust me. Vance knew more about this subdivision than any man alive should. Before the divorce, before the market crashed, this cul-de-sac had been his golden ticket. A 15-home build-out for a mid-level developer that promised enough in commissions to put Lucy through middle school without breathing hard. He'd walked the site maps so many times he could still see them behind his eyes. The blue lines of storm drains and service easements threading under the pretty beige boxes. The weird half-finished crawlspace network the builder had carved out between lots for maintenance access, then quietly abandoned when costs ran over. Most homeowners never knew. Vance did. He hustled Lucy to the laundry closet, the one that backed onto the garage wall. The washer hummed faintly. He yanked the plug, rolled the machine forward until it scraped tile. Behind it, an innocuous square of plywood, screwed in place. Get me the screwdriver from the junk drawer, he said. Outside, the commander's voice counted down. 10-9. Lucy's hands shook as she rifled through the drawer. Utensils clattered. She came back with a Phillips, eyes huge. 6-5. Vance attacked the screws, fingers clumsy with adrenaline. One dropped, pinged against the tile, rolled out of sight. 3-2. He ripped the board off, exposing a black rectangle that smelled of old concrete and dust. Cool air seeped out. Inside, he said. On your stomach, elbows and knees. Don't stop till I tell you. Lucy stared. Dad, Boots thundered onto the porch. Vance grabbed her shoulders, softer than it felt, and pushed her toward the gap. Go, Lucy. Now. Her terror broke, and she slid into the darkness. He followed, clutching the locket so hard the edges bit his palm. As he shoved the plywood roughly back into place behind his boots, the front door exploded inward with a shock that rattled the house's frame. The sound of splintering would fill the air. Men's voices, sharp and clipped, spilled into the hallway. Entry team, move, move, move. Clear left. Stairs. The confined space pressed against Vance's shoulders as he crawled. Rough concrete scraped his forearms through the thin cotton of his shirt. He could hear Lucy's ragged breathing just ahead, the scuff of her sneakers on grit. Above them, boots pounded past the laundry closet. A weight hit the wall so close fine dust sifted down onto his neck. Somewhere behind, glass shattered. He fought the instinct to freeze. He'd seen the original plans. This maintenance crawl ran under the shared driveway slab, then branched behind the other houses, terminating at an access shaft that opened into the storm drain easement behind the cul-de-sac. At least, it had 3 years ago when the developer had been cutting corners and inspectors weren't looking. If someone had sealed it since, they were dead. The tunnel turned. He followed it by memory and by Lucy's faint, scraping sounds. His tie snagged on a protruding nail. He jerked, nearly choking, then tore it free and left it behind like snake skin. Voices above muffled now. Negative on asset in primary search. He has a kid, sir. Girls' room's empty. Then they're still inside. Thermal says 2 heat signatures ground level. Thermal. Vance's chest constricted. They weren't just soldiers playing house call. They had satellite or drone oversight. Whatever this was, it was bigger than a missing piece of government jewelry. Ahead, Lucy whimpered. The sound was barely more than a breath, but in the confined dark it felt like a shout. Almost there, he whispered. You're doing great. Just a little further. The tunnel sloped slightly downward, the air growing cooler, damper. The smell shifted from dust to something metallic and wet. When Lucy's sneakers thumped instead of scraped, he knew they'd hit the shaft. He bumped into her legs. Stop. Feel around in front of you. There should be a drop. Her hand found the edge. There's a hole, she whispered, voice trembling. That's good. That's our way out. He pressed the locket into his pocket and fumbled for his phone, thumb hovering over the screen, the instinct to call 911 nearly overwhelming. He stopped himself. If these men were who they claimed, emergency dispatch would patch him straight back to them. If they weren't, if this was something off books, they might already own the lines. He turned the phone's flashlight on instead. A narrow shaft dropped 6 feet to a concrete channel below, part of the storm drain system that funneled rainwater toward the retention pond behind the subdivision. A crude metal ladder, more like rebar welded into rungs, clung to one side. You go first, he said. I'll be right behind. I'm scared, she whispered. So am I, he admitted. But scared people move faster, one rung at a time. She swung her legs down, toes searching for purchase, then lowered herself out of sight. The dim beam caught the pale blur of her face, turned up toward him, then she stepped aside. Vance slung himself onto the ladder. As his feet hit the channel, a deep concussive thud rolled through the concrete around them, distant but unmistakable. They'd breached another part of the house.
He killed the flashlight and grabbed Lucy's hand. The storm drain was just high enough for him to hunch without scraping his head. Thin daylight bled in from distant grates. They splashed down the tunnel, sneakers slipping on algae. The air grew cooler, fresher, until they rounded a bend and saw the slatted outline of a culvert opening ahead, draped in weeds. Vance pressed Lucy to the side wall as he edged up and peered out through the bars. Their quiet little cul-de-sac looked like a crime scene. 2 more SUVs blocked the far end now. A cluster of uniforms had fanned out into his backyard, boots trampling Mrs. Hargrove's rosebushes next door. One man stood at his back sliding glass door, rifle angled in, waiting for something to move. But no one was looking this way. The culvert disgorged into a shallow drainage ditch that ran along the rear fence line, then disappeared into a strip of scrub and mesquite leading toward the main road. He checked his watch out of old habit. It had been less than 10 minutes since the commander first spoke. 10 minutes to erase a life. He wrenched at the rusted gate. It groaned, but didn't budge. Padlocked. Of course. He shoved Lucy back down the tunnel's curve, away from the opening. "Cover your ears," he murmured. He wrapped his hand around the lock, felt the rough, corroded metal. Then he did something he hadn't done since he was a teenager breaking into his dad's shed. He braced his heel against the gate and kicked. The lock snapped on the second try, brittle with age. The gate jutted open an inch, then more. He stopped breathing, listening for a shout. Nothing. Just the distant murmur of radios and the mechanical clack of someone's rifle being checked. He eased the gate open wide enough for them to slip through. "Stay low," he whispered. "Crawl if you have to. We're going to the trees." They emerged into ankle-deep weeds, the sun a shock after the tunnel. Vance hunched, almost bent double, one hand on Lucy's shoulder, and they scuttled along the ditch, invisible beneath the fence line. At the end of the row, where the subdivision's neatly fenced yards ended, the ditch cut under a gravel maintenance road and into a larger swath of scruffy greenbelt. A stand of wild mesquite and cedar formed a thin screen between the manicured world of the cul-de-sac and the roar of the state highway beyond. Vance didn't straighten until they were in the trees. Only then did he allow himself a breath that didn't hurt. He turned, pulled Lucy into him, held her until her shaking eased enough that he could feel his own. Behind them, sirens began to wail, not local, but lower, meaner. Maybe more vehicles joining the blockade. Maybe something else. "Dad," Lucy said into his shirt. Are we fugitives?" He almost laughed. It came out broken. "We're just leaving early," he said. "Field trip. Come on." They moved through the thin belt of trees until the highway's edge came into view. A wide shoulder, a gas station half a mile down, a scatter of morning traffic. Ordinary life, oblivious. He flagged down the first pickup that slowed enough to see them. The driver was a thick-set man in a paint-splattered t-shirt and ball cap, suspicion etched deep around his mouth. Truck broke down, he called out the passenger window. Gas line leak at the house, Vance lied without missing a beat. Cops and fire trucks everywhere. They're evacuating the block. "I just need to get my kid clear." The man squinted past him, saw nothing but trees, and finally jerked his chin. "Get in. I'm headed toward Austin." Vance boosted Lucy into the cabin, slid in after her, and resisted the urge to check the rearview mirror every 3 seconds all the way to the edge of the city. They got out at a strip mall 30 minutes later. The driver accepted Vance's thanks with a grunt and pulled away. Only then did Vance's hands start to really shake. He steered Lucy into the relative anonymity of a big-box store, bought her a ball cap and a too-big hoodie, bought himself a cheap change of clothes and a backpack. In the men's room, under fluorescent lights that made everyone look guilty, he stared at his own reflection. Dust in his hair. Smudge on his cheek. Shirt rumpled, sweat stuck. A respectable real estate agent who had walked out of his life that morning and could never walk back in. He splashed water on his face, then forced himself to focus. Asset. The word from the megaphone echoed. If 30 men were willing to tear apart his house for it, he needed to know what it was before he made his next mistake. They checked into a motel off the interstate under the most common name on his credit card. It wasn't much of a disguise, but it put walls between them and the open. The room smelled like stale cigarettes and industrial cleaner. The carpet had a pattern designed to hide stains and mostly failed. Lucy sat on the edge of one of the double beds, dolphin clutched tight, staring at the muted TV where some daytime talk show played to no one. "Are we going back home?" she asked. Vance plugged his beat-up laptop into the wall, fingers already moving. "Not yet," he said. "I have to figure some things out first." "Like why the army hates us?" He swallowed. Something like that. He set the ceramic bowl from home on the wobbly motel table in his mind, reached for what had started all this. The locket felt colder than it had earlier, as if the time in his pocket had leached away any warmth it ever had. Up close, under the yellow motel lamp, the emblem was clearer. Wings, yes, but not angelic, more like the stylized blades of a turbine, curving around a central shield. Around the rim, almost worn smooth, was a ring of tiny etched numbers and letters. He found a seam with his thumbnail and pried. The back popped open with a stubborn little click. Inside, there was no photo. No curl of hair. No folded scrap of a lover's note. Instead, the hollow cavity cradled a black rectangle the size of a fingernail, set into a custom mount. One end gleamed with the telltale metal tongue of a USB-C connector, the other printed with microscopic white text. HST/LVL7//AUTHIs only. He had no idea what any of it meant, except that it screamed not meant for him. Is it a bomb? Lucy asked from the bed. Her voice made him jump. He hadn't heard her cross the carpet. No, he said, though he wasn't completely sure. It's a storage device. Like a really fancy thumb drive. I think. Like for pictures? Maybe. Or blackmail material. Or launch codes. Or the names of everyone about to come through that motel door. He slid the drive out carefully, as if the wrong angle might break the world, and plugged it into the side of his laptop. The screen blinked. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a window popped up, no familiar operating system logo, no worrying icons. Just a black box with a single line of white text. Enter passphrase. Of course, he muttered. He tried the obvious ones first, fingers moving faster than his thoughts. 0000. His own last name. The sequence of numbers etched on the rim. Each time, the cursor blinked, impassive, and then denied. On the fourth rejection, the message changed. Attempt limit approaching. Further guessing will purge all content. His gut clenched. Whatever was on here was locked tighter than anything a civilian was meant to see. And he was already one bad guess away from erasing it. He unplugged the drive fast, heart pounding, as if the laptop might explode in his hands. Lucy watched him. So we don't know what it is, she said. Not yet. Maybe that lady on the road wanted you to give it to those guys. He heard the tremor in her voice under the casual words. I don't think so, he said. If she did, she wouldn't have told me not to go home. Then who? She asked. He didn't have an answer. He glanced at the empty locket shell. Something on the inside of the metal caught the light, a faint scratch pattern he'd missed before. He angled it toward the lamp. It wasn't scratches. It was engraving, tiny and precise along the inner rim. NYC H47 W12TH 417. A place. Or coordinates. Or both. He pulled his phone out and, for the first time since they'd crawled into the wall, risked a data connection long enough to type the string into a Maps app. The blue dot zoomed in on Manhattan. West 12th Street near the Hudson. Building number 417. A warehouse district converted into offices and overpriced condos. Someone had hidden an address inside a locket inside a homeless woman who was not homeless on a road patrolled by unmarked sedans and pseudo-military task forces. This wasn't random. This was a relay. Is that where we're going now? Lucy asked. He stared at the map, at the thousands of tiny streets poking out from that one blue pin, at the distance between here and there. New York. The far end of the country. A place where two more people could disappear into the background noise. If we stay here, he said slowly, they know exactly where to look. They know my name, my address, probably my license plate. They already found us once. And if we go there? Lucy asked. He thought of the woman's eyes on the road. Not begging. Not pleading. Judging. Passing something forward. Then maybe, he said, we find someone who's on the other side of this. Her small fingers crept into his. I don't want to be in the middle, she whispered. He squeezed back. Me neither. But sometimes you don't get to pick the field. Just how you run it. They left the motel an hour later. He paid cash for the room, cash for a rideshare to the bus station, cash for 2 tickets instead of 1 cheap flight with his traceable cards. On the TV in the bus terminal, a local news anchor's smile didn't reach her eyes as she read off a teleprompter. Authorities are investigating an incident in the suburban community of Lake Elms this morning. Homeland Security representatives on scene would not comment, but residents report heavily armed officials entering a single-family home. Sources say the homeowner may be linked to a domestic terror probe involving critical energy infrastructure. A grainy photo flashed on the screen. His house. Then, for a second, his own face from his real estate website, looking more rested and more foolish. Lucy looked up at him, stricken. He turned away before she could see the armed and dangerous Chiron. On the overnight bus, as Texas flattened into darkness outside the window and then unrolled into other states, Vance didn't sleep. He watched the aisle instead, watched the roads at every stop, watched for peaked caps where there should only be truckers and college kids and exhausted parents. 2 days later, New York rose up around them in a forest of glass and steel. The city was an assault of sound and smell after the hushed fear of the bus. Horns. Sirens. Steam belching from manhole covers. People everywhere, moving fast, eyes on their own destinations. No one spared him more than a passing glance. He bought Lucy a hot dog from a street cart and a pair of cheap tourist sunglasses that swallowed half her face. She tugged at his sleeve, overwhelmed but stubbornly holding it together. Are we there? She asked. Almost. West 12th Street near the Hudson had the look of a neighborhood that used to be warehouses and had decided, collectively, it was done with that. Brick facades cleaned and repointed. Old loading docks turned into chic lobbies. Glass doors with keypads instead of padlocks. Number 417 looked like the rest on the outside, red brick, tall windows, a black awning with no name on it. Just the number in small, discreet silver. Vance hovered across the street for a full minute, heart racing. This could be where the other side waited. Or where the same men from his lawn had set up their net wider. He touched the locket through his shirt, last weight of the woman's hand still lingering in the metal. You stay right next to me, he told Lucy. No matter who talks to us, you don't go with anyone unless I say. She nodded, jaw set. They crossed. Inside, the lobby was narrow and cool, all polished concrete and muted lighting. A bored-looking security guard sat behind a small desk, scrolling his phone. He glanced up as the door shut behind them. Help you? He asked. Vance tightened his grip on the strap of his backpack. I'm here to see, Suite H47? The guard's gaze sharpened just a fraction. There's no H floors in this building, sir. We go 1 through 6. Vance swallowed. Maybe it's, like an internal code? I was told H47, West 12th, for 17. The guard stared a beat too long. Then he reached under the desk, pressed something out of sight, and said, take the elevator to 6. Ask for Ms. Klein. She's expecting you. Expecting. The word should have comforted him. It didn't. The elevator was small, mirrors on 3 sides, the air faintly tinged with someone's expensive cologne. Lucy stared at their reflections, at how tired her father looked, at the way his shoulders had a new kind of tension she'd never seen before. You think this is safe? She asked. No, he said. But I think the other option is worse. On 6, a simple glass door marked H47 opened as they approached, as if someone had been watching a camera feed. A woman in her mid-40s stood waiting. She was tall, dressed in dark jeans and a charcoal blazer, dark hair pulled back into a no-nonsense knot. No visible weapon, but her posture had the same contained readiness he'd seen in the men on his lawn. Except hers pointed inward, not outward, like she was braced against bad news rather than about to deliver it. "Mr. Sterling," she said. "And this must be Lucy." His stomach dipped. "How do you know our names?" "You tripped a very specific set of alarms when you plugged that drive-in," she said. Her voice was low, without much inflection, but her eyes were anything but flat, sharp, assessing, a little weary. "Come in. Before someone else realizes it." He hesitated on the threshold. "Who are you?" "Mara Klein," she said. "I used to work for people who wore uniforms like the ones on your lawn. Now I work to keep them honest. Or at least, a little less murderous." Lucy glanced up at him. "She knows about the house," she whispered. Mara's gaze softened a notch as it flicked to the girl. "I know enough to say I'm sorry," she said. "You didn't deserve that welcome. But you did exactly what she hoped you'd do." "Who?" Vance asked. Mara stepped aside, letting the door swing shut behind them with a soft click that sounded too much like finality. "The woman you found on the road," she said. "The one who gave you that." She pointed, not at his pocket, but at the exact spot where the locket pressed against the inside of his shirt. "May I?" He pulled it out, fingers reluctant to let go. She took it carefully, almost respectfully, turning it in her hand until the emblem caught the office light. For the first time, her composure cracked. "Well, I'll be damned," she breathed. She actually pulled it off. "What?" Vance demanded. "Who is she?" Mara looked up at him, and he saw something like awe there. And grief. "You really don't know," she said. "I found her in the middle of nowhere. She looked like she'd been dragged through a fire. She drank my water, gave me this, told me not to go home. That's all I know. 2 hours later there were 30 men at my door calling it an asset and trying to tear my life apart. So no, I don't know. And I'm out of patience for being in the dark." Mara studied him for a long moment, as if weighing how much truth he could take before he bolted. "That emblem," she said finally, tapping the wings on the locket with one nail, "belongs to an unofficial task group that never existed. Off the books, deniable, used when the government wanted to pretend it wasn't involved in certain operations. Internally, we called it Hestia." "Hestia," Vance repeated. The word felt familiar in some distant way he couldn't place. "The goddess of the hearth," Mara said. "Keeper of the flame." It was an in-joke, at first. Then it became something else. She turned the locket over. "The woman you helped commanded that group. She was the highest-ranking officer in the country, willing to publicly question how much power we were giving to private energy and security contractors. 3 years ago, she disappeared during an investigation into a series of accidental refinery explosions and offshore rig failures that just happened to benefit one conglomerate. Official story said she died in a freak platform fire in the Gulf. Body never recovered." She met his eyes. "Her name is General Hestia Vega. And until this morning, everyone who mattered believed she was dead." The cold in New York wasn't just weather, it was a presence, a physical weight that settled into the marrow of Vance's bones. He stood on the fire escape of a condemned tenement in the Bronx, the rusted metal grating biting into the soles of his boots, watching the street below through a gap in the brickwork. Mara Klein had given them a head start, a 3-hour window and a burner phone, but she'd been clear about one thing. The people hunting them didn't follow standard police protocols. They didn't wait for warrants or backup. They moved like a virus. Vance checked the phone screen. A simple thermal map app Mara had loaded showed a grid of the neighborhood. Dozens of red blobs were converging on their position, moving with terrifying coordination. They weren't knocking on doors. They were sweeping the blocks, using military-grade heat signatures to filter out the homeless and the innocent, leaving only the heat prints of 2 people huddled together. "Dad," Lucy whispered from the shadows of the fire escape landing. She was wrapped in the charcoal blazer Mara had given her, shivering despite the layers. They're getting closer. I know, Luce. Just a minute. He zoomed in on one of the red blobs on the screen. The figure wasn't wearing a uniform. It was tactical gear. Black Kevlar, night vision goggles, but the silhouette was wrong for a standard infantryman. Too bulky in the shoulders, too much tech strapped to the chest. Then he saw the patch on the arm of the leading figure, visible even in the grainy thermal overlay because of the heat signature from a power source on the suit. It wasn't a flag. It wasn't a government crest. It was a stylized inside a shield. Ethelgard Solutions. The name hit him like a physical blow. He'd seen it before. On the prospectus of a rival development firm that had bought out half the Texas shoreline 2 years ago. A private tech conglomerate that specialized in security logistics and energy infrastructure optimization. They weren't military. They were a private army, a corporation with its own flag and a budget larger than some nations. They aren't cops, Vance muttered, the realization turning his blood to ice. They're contractors. What does that mean? Lucy asked, her teeth chattering. It means they don't have to follow the rules, he said, grabbing her hand. Because they own the people who wrote them. He looked at the alleyway below. A dump truck was idling, the driver smoking a cigarette. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot. We're going to jump, he said, hoisting her onto the railing. What? Dad, that's 2 stories. I'll catch you. The dumpster is right there. It's soft. He didn't wait for her to argue. He swung her out, trusting his grip, and lowered her until she dropped the last 4 feet into the rusted metal bin with a hollow clang. He followed a second later, rolling to absorb the impact, the smell of rotting garbage and old grease filling his nose. Before Lucy could scream, he clamped a hand over her mouth. Shoo, run. They scrambled out the back of the alley just as the fire escape door above them was kicked in. The sound of boots on metal echoed like gunshots. They spent the next week living in the arteries of America's infrastructure, bus stations, truck stops, the back of a landscaping van that took them down the I-95 corridor. Vance stopped sleeping. He watched every face, checked every mirror. But Ethelgard was relentless. They had eyes everywhere, traffic cams, ATM withdrawals, even the toll tags Vance had to use to move fast. He thought he was being smart by avoiding airports, sticking to backroads. He was wrong. It happened just outside Jacksonville. They were supposed to meet a contact Mara had set up, a retired dock worker who could get them on a cargo ship to South America. Vance had scouted the meeting point, a deserted marina office, for 2 hours. He'd checked the perimeter. He'd ensured no cars followed them. He had Lucy wait in the car, engine running, while he walked into the office to confirm the signal. Stay in the car, he'd said. Do not unlock the doors for anyone but me. Okay, Dad. He was inside for 3 minutes. When he came out, the car was there. But the back door was open. On the dashboard, his burner phone was blinking with a new text message. We have the asset. Refinery. Midnight. Come alone or she dies. Attached was a photo. Lucy, sitting in a high-backed chair in a sterile room, holding her stuffed dolphin so hard the stuffing was coming out. She wasn't crying. She looked terrified. Vance dropped the phone. The world tilted. The rational part of his brain. The real estate agent who negotiated commissions and worried about school tuition, shattered. He looked at the horizon, where the massive silhouette of the Ethelgard offshore refinery loomed against the twilight sky. It was a fortress of steel and pipe, a cathedral of energy production that processed 40% of the East Coast's fuel. They had taken her there because it was their kingdom. Because they thought he was just a scared father who would trade a drive for a life. Vance picked up the phone. He didn't call Mara. He didn't call the police. He looked at the locket, still heavy in his pocket. The drive was inside it. You wanted a fight, he whispered to the empty air. You got one. He didn't wait for midnight. Vance didn't sneak into the refinery, he walked in the front gate. He used his real ID. He drove his own car, a beat-up sedan he'd bought with cash in Georgia. He stopped at the security booth and rolled down the window. "I'm here to see your CEO," he said to the guard. "Tell him Vance Sterling has the Hestia file, and I'm willing to trade it for my daughter." The guard looked at him like he was crazy, but the name Hestia made his hand hover over a red button. 10 minutes later, Vance was being escorted through the maze of pipes and catwalks by 4 men in Ethelgard tactical gear. They didn't take him to an office. They took him to the control center. A glass-walled room suspended high above the refinery floor, looking down on the churning machinery and the ocean beyond. A man stood by the window, back to the door. He was older, wearing a suit that cost more than Vance's house. "Mr. Sterling," the man said, turning. He had a face like a sharpened knife, pale, angular, cold. "I am Director Kovic. I'm told you have something of ours." "I have something of General Vega's," Vance corrected, his voice steady despite the adrenaline screaming in his veins. "And you have something of mine." Kovic smiled, a thin, bloodless expression. "The girl is safe. For now. The drive, please." "Let me see her first." Kovic nodded to one of the guards. A monitor on the wall flickered to life. It showed a live feed of a room deep in the complex. Lucy was there. She was alone. "Lucy?" Vance said, stepping toward the screen. "Dad?" Her voice was small, cracking. "They said you were coming." "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." "Give me the drive, Mr. Sterling," Kovic said, extending a hand. "And you both leave. On a helicopter. New identities. Money. Whatever you want." Vance looked at the man, then at the screen. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the locket. He held it up. "This is what you want," Vance said. "The proof that you sabotaged the Gulf platforms to drive up energy prices. The proof that you hired mercenaries to assassinate a 4-star general." "It is," Kovic said softly. "And it is very valuable." "It's also encrypted," Vance lied. "And I set a dead man switch." Kovic's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" "I uploaded the key to a server 3 hours ago," Vance said, bluffing with every breath. "If I don't enter a code every 10 minutes, it auto-posts to every news outlet from CNN to WikiLeaks. Right now, my heart rate is linked to the timer. If my heart stops, the world sees everything." It was a classic movie trope, but Kovic didn't know that. He looked at the locket, then at Vance's chest. "You're bluffing," Kovic sneered. "You're a real estate agent. You don't have the skills to set up a dead man switch." "Try me," Vance said. He squeezed the locket tight. "Let her go. Put her on a boat. Once she's clear, you get the drive." Kovic stared at him for a long, agonizing second. Then he signaled the guard. "Bring the girl. We'll do the exchange on the loading dock." They marched him down, deeper into the belly of the beast. The noise of the refinery was deafening, a roar of pressure and heat. The loading dock was vast, open to the night air, with a helicopter idling in the center. Lucy was brought out. She ran to Vance, burying her face in his side. He held her with one arm, the locket in the other hand. "The boat is waiting in the cove," Kovic said, pointing to a small skiff bobbing in the dark water below the dock. "Get in. The pilot will take you to international waters." "The drive," Vance said. He held it out. Kovic stepped forward, greed overriding caution. He reached for it. Vance didn't let go. "Let her go first," Vance said. "She gets in the boat. Then you get this." Kovic nodded to the guards. They shoved Lucy toward the ramp leading down to the water. She looked back, tears streaming. "Dad. Go, Lucy. Run." She scrambled down the ramp. Vance watched her reach the boat. He saw the pilot help her in. The engine started. "She's safe," Kovac said, his hand snaking out. "Now give it." Vance looked at the boat pulling away into the darkness. He looked at Kovac. "You know," Vance said, "I really did upload the key." Kovac froze. "What?" "But not to a server," Vance said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a second, identical locket. A cheap souvenir he'd bought in Times Square, swapped out while Kovac was distracted by the bluff. "I mailed the real one to the Washington Post 3 days ago. Registered mail. It should be on the editor's desk tomorrow morning." Kovac's face turned a shade of purple that matched the refinery flares. "Kill him," he screamed. The guards raised their rifles. Vance threw the fake locket into the machinery of the conveyor belt behind them. A massive spinning gear that ground it into scrap metal instantly. "You'll never find it now," Vance yelled. The guards hesitated, looking at the shredded metal, looking at Kovac. In that second of confusion, the night sky tore open. It wasn't a sound at first, it was a vibration that rattled the teeth in Vance's skull. Then came the thwup-thwup-thwup of rotors, heavy, aggressive, military rotors. Searchlights blinded them from above, pinning Kovac and his men like insects on a slide. "Drop your weapons," a voice boomed from the sky, amplified to a deafening level. "This is a federal raid." Kovac screamed, "It's a bluff. Shoot him." But the guards were already dropping their rifles, hands up, terrified by the black hawks descending from the clouds. Vance dropped to his knees, covering his head, dragging Lucy's memory into his mind to keep from shaking apart. The side doors of the lead chopper slid open. Ropes dropped. Figures in full tactical gear rappelled down with terrifying speed, but they weren't Ethelgard mercs. Their gear was matte black, no logos, just the letters DOD stenciled on their vests. And behind them, walking down the ramp of the second chopper, was a woman. She wasn't wearing rags. She wasn't wrapped in soot. She wore a pristine, dress blue military uniform with 4 stars on the collar. Her hair was silver and pulled back in a severe bun. Her face was clean, the lines of hardship replaced by the iron resolve of command. She walked with a cane, but her spine was straight as a rifle barrel. General Hestia Vega. She walked right past the frozen Ethelgard guards, ignoring them, and stopped in front of Vance. The refinery was silent now, save for the idling choppers and the roar of the fire in the stacks. "You kept it safe," she said. Her voice wasn't the rasp of the beggar, it was the command of a woman who had ordered armies. Vance looked up at her, his heart hammering against his ribs. You're alive." "I never left," she said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "I was just, undercover. Waiting for the right person to carry the torch." She turned to Kovac, who was being zip-tied by federal agents. "Richard Kovac," she said, her voice dropping to a freezing point. "You are under arrest for treason, domestic terrorism, and the attempted murder of a United States general. You can't prove anything." Kovac spat, struggling. "The data is gone. He destroyed it." General Vega looked at Vance. Vance reached into his sock, the one place he hadn't checked for bugs, and pulled out a tiny, microSD card. He'd taken it out of the locket back in the Bronx and hidden it there. "I'm a real estate agent," Vance said, his legs finally giving out as he sat on the cold concrete. "I know how to hide things in the walls." Vega took the card. She handed it to an aide without looking at it. "Get him out of here," she ordered, gesturing to Kovac. "And seize every server in this facility." She turned back to Vance. The steel in her eyes softened, just a fraction. She offered him a hand. "Mr. Sterling," she said. "You have a daughter waiting." The reunion wasn't on a boat. It was on the tarmac of a private airstrip an hour later. Lucy ran from the car the moment it stopped, throwing herself at Vance with enough force to knock the wind out of him. He held her, burying his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of shampoo and fear and safety. I knew you'd come, she sobbed into his shirt. I knew it. I promised, he whispered. Behind them, General Vega was being helped into a staff car. She paused and looked back at the single father and daughter holding on to each other like they were the only two people on Earth. She beckoned an aide. Get me the file on Vance Sterling. Ma'am? His debts. His mortgage. His credit. She watched Vance comfort his daughter. Wipe them. All of them. And buy his house back from the bank if they've foreclosed. Then find him a new one. Somewhere quiet. With a good school district. Yes, ma'am. And, she added, looking at the way Vance stood up, dusting off his knees, ready to face whatever came next, offer him a job. We need someone with his talent for improvisation and intelligence. 2 weeks later, the sun was setting over a different ocean, the Pacific this time. Vance sat on the porch of a small house in Monterey, California. It wasn't a mansion, but it had a view that cost more than his old life, and the deed was in a trust that no bank could touch. Lucy was on the beach below, chasing seagulls, her laughter carrying up the cliffside. Vance held a glass of iced tea, the condensation wetting his palm. On the table next to him lay a thick envelope. Inside was a check. Not for a commission, but a consulting fee from a shell corporation that didn't exist on any public record. It was enough to pay for college, for retirement, for everything. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The Senate subpoenas start tomorrow. Kovic is singing. You did good, Agent Sterling. He smiled, deleted the message, and set the phone down. He wasn't a spy. He wasn't a soldier. He was just a dad who had given a bottle of water to a stranger. He watched Lucy build a sandcastle, strong and defiant against the tide. For the first time in years, the knot in his chest was gone. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was just peace. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruising purples and golds, Vance Sterling finally took a breath that felt like his own. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going.